I hope you are able to hear me. If you are not, please let me know at your earliest convenience. This is our effective and engaging Google Meet session. In this particular session, we'll look at the best practices for using Google Meet, whether it's for courses that are held live remote or courses that are held in a distance situation. So there are several pieces that we want to get to, but first, if it's at all possible, it's best to join Google Meet using Chrome. However, we're noticing that there are some hiccups that are happening with Chrome. So I will request your patience as I work with flipping back and forth between different screens and getting bumped out of the presentation. So a little bit of patience there, but for now, go ahead and take a few moments to grab a piece of paper and a bold marker or a crayon, something that'll show up from a distance, and write us a funny story. You only get 4 or 5 words in which to do it. Make sure you're writing big. You can fit big words if there's only 5 of them onto one sheet of paper, but don't show your paper yet. If you leave your camera and microphone muted as you join, this gives everyone an opportunity to reduce the number of connectivity problems that are potentially happening as they join into your Meet session. So just leaving the cameras off and the microphones muted tend to be really helpful for your students as you begin to join that session. All right, so while we're thinking of our 5 words here, I'll move on to my next one. We're going to need you to change your Meet layout to a 49 box grid. So the way to do that is to click the triple dots menu and select Change Layout. Then you're going to pick Tiled, and at the slider on the bottom, move it all the way over to the right. When you click X to close, what that will do is give you a different display of the Google Meet session. So if you only have 49 people in your class, you will have a 7 by 7 grid of all of your students. So if they all turn on their cameras at once, you will see your entire class right there in one screen. One of the reasons to change the layout to this, it's not very good if you're doing a presentation, but it's really cool if you're doing some kind of class engagement activity. So what I'm going to do is move out of this and back over into my Meet space. You're probably getting that moire effect here since I'm presenting, but I'm going to go ahead and show you what that looks like on my view. If I look at Tiled and then move this to 49, when I stop presenting, everybody appears all at once. So I'm going to ask anyone to turn off their camera, absolutely all of you, and only those with the last names that begin with A through E. Please turn on your camera and show us your 5-word story. If you aren't using a camera, type it into the chat if you could, please. Presenting need to pee. We're noticing if we have a screen blur, we might not be able to see what it says. We're also noticing some reverses here. We might have to turn off the screen blur. This is another way for you to quickly see. Oh, we're almost there. I've almost got you, Gabby. Leslie's reversed in my view.
How do you turn off the screen or the blur?
I think it may be just a camera focus issue for you. A little bit. Oh, man, woman, TV. I almost had it. Blah, blah. There it goes.
The black background blur is on. I think that's what's causing the problem.
Right.
Right.
A relatively new thing toward the end of last semester that I never messed with. Where is that in settings?
That's in the triple dot menu. Let me get you to where it would be. And I don't think I can do it on this particular one.
Change background.
Yeah, change background is the one that you're looking for. Okay, so that was A through E, and we only had a few. So now the F through I.
Here we go.
Everybody else turn your cameras off. And F through I, share your 5-word stories. Google Meet equals phone call, pretty much, with faces. It's like that camera phone that we were all promised ages ago. Mary, I've got a little bit. Let me see. I'll pin you up here. Can you bring it up just a little bit? A little more. I understand. I can't see below that. Nothing. Well, we got 3 out of the 5, and at all would have given you the full 5, but I understand nothing would work too. It's incredibly frustrating when you're trying to deal with technology that doesn't want to work the way that you think it should. And if you have an interface that is not user-friendly, or you're new to the tech, it can be quite a headache. So what we'll be doing here today is going over a few of these kinds of activities. For something like what we just did, you can do this while you're taking roll. You can go ahead and do this as you're getting ready with your housekeeping for the day. If you need those few moments, have them take a few minutes to write a 5-word sentence about a topic from the previous session. Have them talk about a question that they have that they don't quite understand. You can add this in the chat as well. Not only does it give you a quick tag for something if you have students who need that participation mark, and we need some way for you to be able to get that. Oops, sorry, I'm trying to mute. Then you have a way for them to tag themselves in the chat, and that becomes another way for you to take attendance. So our agenda today is going to be cover some of these best practices with Google Meet. There's 3 different sections that we'll cover here. What to do before the session, what to do during the session, and afterwards. What are the best practices for each of those? We'll also look over the newest features, trying a few of those out, and that avoiding a ghost town syndrome. We'll talk a bit more about engagement and discussions in your Google Meet sessions so that your students will be a little more excited and maybe turn on those cameras when you need them to and not just leave them off and leave. So before your session starts, some of the best practices here. Google works best with Google. If it's at all possible, use Chrome, because that will give you a smoother experience. It still has some hiccups, as I discovered today, but it really does perform best if you're able to use the Google applications. This means docs and slides instead of Word and PowerPoint. That means converting PowerPoints. So that may seem a little bit scary at first, but converting them is actually very easy. And when you get a copy of these slides, this Convert PowerPoints link is linked to an exact slide in another presentation that will walk you through this process. All you have to do is upload it to Drive. And then when you're in Drive, right-click on it. When you right-click, you'll get an open with, and then select Google Slides. That's it. It'll create a new version of the file. You can see it just above this one, the right-click one. That's the Google Slides version. And then when you work with that, you're going to find that you no longer have to use the full screen. You can use tabs, which can be very helpful. So why convert? Why bother with this? If you're using PowerPoint, you often have to share the entire screen when you're presenting in order to avoid only pieces of your PowerPoint being shared with your students. But if you use Google Slides, you can present from a tab while you're in Chrome. That means that you could jump to another tab without losing your presentation and take attendance or check and see what people are doing in Blackboard. All of those give you some flexibility without having to give that precious screen real estate over to only your slideshow. If you want to monitor what your students are asking.
We can't see your slides.
Oh, you can't see my slides again. Good gracious. Thanks for letting me know. I hate that it does this. Whoops. Okay, are we able to see now? Looks like it. Your attendees are only going to see the currently shared tab while you're looking around to see which tab to share next. As we've just seen, sometimes it boots you out and doesn't let your screen share. They're working on this. If you've only got one display, one screen to work from, one monitor, use a split screen display. Log into the same Google Meet session twice, and then pull one of your screens to snap it over to the right side of your window and the other one over to the left side of your window. Then on the one, you can show what your students are seeing and follow along, move your power or your slideshow this way. In the other one, you can watch what your students are doing in the Meet session. You've got your grid view so you can see them all. You can even have students raise hands using this method if you don't want them to use the interface. So there are ways to maximize the screen space that you're allotted, whether you have one monitor or multiple. And the first one is to go and pull those slides into the Google Slides format so that you're not stuck using full screen in PowerPoint. Another piece is this makes it really easy to update your slides each term. Oftentimes, if you have to update a PowerPoint, you have to pull it out of the class and pull it back up into the class. If you're using Google Slides, you just update the slides. This is a link that will update with the newest version. The Google Slides Google Pursuit session has a lot more on using Google Slides, but it's strongly suggested that you use that format with Meet. Another best practice here is to create a permanent Meet through a calendar event. What this does is locks your Meet room code. So that code is carried and active for the entire term. And while this is kind of a cumbersome practice for us right now, this process is built into Canvas. So if you create a Canvas Meet room in Canvas, then you don't have to do any of this other stuff or worry about it being permanent, because it is. It is permanent when you create it in Canvas. But for now, the best practice is to work from the calendar event. Create an event, click Custom, and then tell it you want it to repeat weekly. Select the days your class meets. Select when it ends or after how many occurrences. And when you click Done, you have that event throughout the entire term will be set with the same link. Then when you add guests, paste all of your student email addresses in for that course, and they will have that populate into their calendar. If you can log in with more than one device, you're going to have a lot more flexibility. If you have a smartphone or a tablet, you can use that to present your slides. Your computer can then be used to monitor your class. You can go ahead and check your chat that way. You can go ahead and push your activities through the computer. And basically your smartphone or tablet kind of just becomes the slide deck, and that's it. We suggest that you use the Meet app on a smartphone or a tablet first to try to do this, because it may be easier with more functionality if you're using the app to join the session that way and sharing your device. The setup over here on the right is one way that some faculty have determined a way to recreate a whiteboard if you don't have a camera facing your whiteboard very easily. So if you are stuck in quarantine at home and you need to explain how to do a problem, you can probably set up a system where you can have your phone hanging off of the edge of a stack of books, and it'll still show students what you're drawing. So you'll be able to set that kind of a arrangement up with the hardware in your class. Think outside the box here. This particular setup was from a quickly cobbled together setup, but once somebody figured out how to piece this together and make some kind of manufactured piece out of it, they're making quite a bit of money off of this. It's 25 bucks a pop on Amazon. So, well, additional flexibility all through your phone to give you another set of hands, so to speak. It's strongly suggested that you test your camera and microphone on every device in advance. You can do this through the triple dots to get to the settings, and the host controls will also let you get to that student access and activity area. Notice I have the microphone off here, but it should be on. Test it with the microphone you're going to use. Test the speakers. Sometimes you can get the speakers to come out of a different set than what you have hooked up, and it'll alert you that could cause some problems. It might. For example, right now, my speakers keep wanting to push to my microphone headset, but I want them to come through the room itself. So I've pushed them to two different areas. This is the best place to go if you're having problems getting heard. Check your microphone here. If you can't hear, check the speakers. The video piece, the send resolution and receive resolution. If you're really struggling with bandwidth, if your students are struggling with bandwidth, if you keep getting kicked out of a room, come to this area of the settings and change your send resolution to the minimum possible. Change your receive to the minimum possible. This will reduce the amount of bandwidth that you're pulling into the Meet session. There's a lot of bandwidth that can be devoted to that particular application. If you reduce it, you may end up with a better experience. Under host controls, if you turn these off, these can be sticky, meaning they will hold on to other sessions as well. When you turn it off, the host has to show up first or nobody can get in. The only people that can get in are the ones that you've invited in the guest list. The only ones, or everybody has to ask to join, whether or not they're Jeffco. Everybody dialing in has to join. You cannot join anonymously, and the only one who can actually phone out of a meeting is the host. So that's some pretty strict access limitations here if you want to control that. The sharing the screen and the chat messages, you may not have realized, but you can turn these off and only allow students to use them when you determine they should use them. It's not best practice to keep these turned off, but you may need to for certain activities, especially for something like if you're giving a proctored test. Don't let students share their screen. It'd be a terrible idea. Don't let them send chat messages. It's a good idea to record a minute or two of a session. Just join in the room, record it, let it come into your inbox, and then play it back. Check the quality of your sound and video. If something is off, you may be able to change it before you have to start making recordings or meeting with students where your sound is blowing them backwards because it's so loud. A few other pieces here in the host controls area in your meeting details. You can access that host controls here or in the settings. This tends to be the fastest way to get to it. You won't have these if you're joining the meeting as an attendee. You only have those features if you are the host of the meeting. From the details bar, or as I said, from the settings area, recording a meeting is easy to do. Best practices, and then I'm going to have you guys do something fun. These are general video tips that you may not realize have a dramatic effect on how you appear to your students. First, Have your light sources in front of you or just angled to the side. Don't place them behind you. You'll either come off looking like you have a halo or you will be a silhouette behind a very bright background. Either way, it's very difficult to see you. So keep your light sources in the front. If you have a window behind you, turn around if you can. Look at the camera as much as you can, not at the screen. It's difficult to do if you're trying to see what a student is saying as they're offering a question or feedback. But really, your students are looking at you and seeing you through that camera. So when you look at that camera, it's almost as if you're looking at them. It feels really fake, but not to them. While you're doing it, it's just bizarre. I'm looking in a little box, but students really feel like you're reaching out to them and talking with them. I've even had faculty say, I don't see how you can be so friendly and warm on this. You're just looking at a box. Yeah, but I know I'm actually looking directly at the students too. So it helps to think of that way. Place your head near the top of the screen if you can when you're framing yourself. If you're able to do that, students can see any official name tags. If you took the time to put on a necklace, let them see it. Ties, let's show those off, gentlemen. They look very nice. This also helps if there's something overlapping the bottom of the screen, like your mute buttons. Students will still be able to see your face and your mouth moving. Be aware of what's visible behind you. Blur if you need to. Put a backdrop over if you absolutely need to. But do be aware of what is behind you and that some of these are being recorded. If you're choosing your clothes to wear, avoid something that's all white, all black, or loud patterns. If you're using Zoom, avoid all green. These will sometimes make it difficult for the system to figure out what's you and what's the background, or it'll just turn up like a blob in some cases. So something nice but kind of neutral, or a bright color as long as it's not a really loud pattern. Hairstyles. If you slick your hair back or tie it back and use backgrounds, you may end up looking like a floating face at times. Just putting a little scarf around your head or wearing a hat even can assist with this. Silly little hats can be a wonderful way to get engagement too. And the most flattering angle for your face is at eye level, not looking down at your camera and not looking up at your camera or off to the side. At eye level is the same way that students would feel that they're most comfortable with you. And of course, check your teeth. That's a big one too. So the next slide is an image of a Zoom meeting full of attendees. And what I want you to do now is see if you can spot any of those who could use some training in best practices with Google Meet. Now, this is just from a quick snapshot. What can you tell could be improved just from this snapshot? When you spot something, use the raise your hand feature and be ready to share your findings. I'm going to actually move to my laptop so that I can see what you guys are doing and raising your hands in here. So I might duck off the screen just a little bit for a moment. Are we ready? The raise your hand can be found if you kind of mouse over towards the bottom of your screen, it'll show up. There we go. Oh, already. A lot of them. Okay, Marianne, please unmute and tell us something.
I didn't know I had my hand up. The one second row, second column, the camera is too low. You can only see the top of their head.
Indeed, we have someone whose camera is way too low. This is very, very common to find. Julie, tell us one you found.
Bottom row, the person is, her head is just kind of like the rest of her body is cut off, and so it's kind of just floating there in the corner.
Are we talking about the one with the, I guess it's a blue scarf?
Yes.
Yes, it is kind of floating there. So a little bit further away from the camera perhaps would help. Connie Kachar.
In the top row, the third picture, there's a lot of light coming from the back.
In which one? The third picture?
Yeah.
Yes. This is someone who is filmed or lit from behind. So even if the face weren't blurred, we would have difficulty really making out their features or being able to see what they're saying as they move their lips. Alan, can you tell us one you've found?
Okay. First, I was going to say all their faces are blurred, but then I realized that was on purpose. No, down the bottom row, just the bottom left-hand corner, the background just seems very distracting. The chandelier hanging on her head and all the pictures and stuff, just distracting.
Definitely. If you have a busy background, your students are going to look at that and not you. At my workspace at home, I have a ceiling fan, and if I place myself just right, it looks like I have this kind of whirring halo behind my head. But if I want the fan running, that's the only place I can go. So I moved on Friday to a different room, which seemed to be a bit more of a distraction, according to some students in Holly's room. But it did cease to give, I didn't have the halo anymore, but I had a whole bunch of blues activity and memorabilia behind me. They did enjoy it, but still, it was a distraction. So excellent one. And Holly, why don't you give us one?
Well, I picked that lower left one too, but simply because from a photographer's point of view, you watch backgrounds and you look for things sticking out of people's heads. And so all of them, in my opinion, are making me crazy. But the chandelier, it's like antlers. And so it's kind of funny. But I will say your background, because we can't connect, I'm going to turn my camera on. Because we aren't connecting face to face with some of our students, I feel like they're not getting a real sense of who we are. So I do like to have some things in my office to help give a sense of who I am, because if I were in the classroom, they might see some of those things. So I think that it does help, and it also makes you more real. Teachers are sometimes seen as not being real. And like, I remember encountering teachers in stores and being like, oh my gosh, they shop. Yeah. So I think having students see us as real people with some of those backgrounds is important, but it can be distracting. So.
Right. And I think if we make it a conscious decision to select what we have in our backgrounds, I think what we'll find is that we're not having the distractions we thought we had. And there are ways for us to make these as connections with students. Just moving to that room and having all of my blues memorabilia in the back actually made it a kind of relaxed and easygoing environment when I was asking questions about what's not working, what's working well. And they seemed a bit more open than I've had other classes, just because I moved to the other room. Now, that might not be something I do regularly, but it worked well for that one.
And it made that connection. You automatically had a bond with some of those students. And relationships, we all know, are important in education. And I think now that they'd be more willing to reach out to you because they are going to remember you based on that memorabilia.
Right. So if we're making that conscious decision, then we're moving forward in a better way than just letting it distract in the background. We're aware of it now. All right. So does anyone think that there's someone in this photo here that's doing things well? Yeah, Michelle talks about how she had her pets in the room with her. If you have an animal on your lap during a Google Meet, ask Kenny Wilson this. Everyone loves to see the animal. It can pull people away from what's going on, but for Dr. Gundlach's courses, it's probably a big plus.
We have a standing rule that if an animal appears in the frame, that animal must be introduced so that we can say that animal is either a good boy or a good girl or a good kitty or a good doggo. Because it's a communications class, it's a great way for me to get people to talk. And it relaxes the tension that people have about their environment being not perfect. So I've had that as a standing rule. It never takes us too far off track, and it is a lot of fun.
All right, Alan, have you got an option for us as a decent Google Meter?
Yes, I think the second one from the left on the top row is it's a good size. Her face is nice and the background looks okay. I'm not sure what that blue thing at the bottom is, but that's a little distracting. But as far as color of her outfit and, stuff like that, looks good.
Yes, that thing at the bottom is actually, I believe, her camera. And while that would be in kind of a bad place, she's done a very good job of getting as much of the best practices as she can in just for this lovely little static image. So she's done fairly well. There are some others that are pretty good. The one at the bottom on that same column isn't too bad, but it might be a little distracting with those items behind her. But overall, it's not too bad for those two. So well done. Well done all. So now that we've kind of set things up before the session, let's look at a few short little things during the section that can help us out as we're going. As I mentioned earlier, blur your backgrounds, but don't use one of the special backgrounds unless you absolutely have to. If you've got a chaos behind you, then use them. But do recognize that these special backgrounds all use a lot more processing power. The computer has to try to constantly assess where you are and what should be removed and replaced with the background. So if you found that strange things appear and disappear on those backgrounds, all of that requires a lot of thought from your computer. If you're just blurring the background, that's a lot less processing power. So if you're having problems with students' connections and difficulty hearing or seeing you, try not to use the special backgrounds, just blur. That'll make a big difference for you. During the session, if you turn on captions, you may be able to hear your students more easily, actually by seeing what they're saying. Sometimes the captioning can capture that word better than your speaker does. So if you're finding that some students have some connectivity issues, turn on the captions. If students are having trouble hearing you, have them do it too. Those captions aren't displayed for everyone. It's only for the individual user and they're not recorded, but they're pretty high quality. If you have a good speaker who speaks clearly, those captions are pretty well done. Just turn them on during a session and you'll see just how good they're getting at that live captioning feature. One of the best features that I think that Google Meet allows is live captioning. A lot of the other ones do not have this, so use it if you can. After the session then, there's a few quick pieces that are going to make this easiest for your students. Always upload your Meet recordings to YouTube. You have an institutional YouTube account. It can easily go in there. You can grab the URL and share that with your students. The reason is because if you just share the Meet recording file straight out of your Google Drive, that whole file has to be downloaded to a device in full before students can open it and view it. If you have an hour-long Meet session, it can take hours, plural, several, in order for a student to be able to get that file to start watching it. If instead you stream that video, you upload it to YouTube and give them the URL to the YouTube version, they can buffer it. When they click that link, they will be able to watch it immediately. They can pause it, they can come back, they can fast forward as they need. Anytime you're recording a Meet and sharing it with students, go through YouTube. This slideshow has the embedded video for how to do that. So when you get this, you can play the video right next to this and you'll be able to walk through the steps to do that. Sharing that URL is far better than sharing the file with students. And certainly don't upload the file to Canvas. Yay. If you're going to re-record or reuse that recording, say for later sessions, if you recorded something in advance and you want to use it again and again, make sure you complete the captioning form. If you go to the CTO resources button from the faculty tab, you can click in straight to that form. It'll walk you through whether or not you need to add captions or if it's good without them. So now we're going to look at some of the newest features, and I'm going to have you try one of these out. I'm going to push you all into breakout rooms and then pull you all back in here pretty quickly too. So you're going to experience some of this, and if you disappear, know that it's probably because your connection wasn't quite as good as it should have been. Some of these features are only available to you via the browser. So if you are on the app on a smartphone, or if you have joined us by phoning in, you probably won't be able to use some of these features. And in fact, I'm curious if you phoned in, what's going to happen when I push you to a breakout room. So the first piece we've already done. The hand raising allows you to quickly see who has raised their hand. And this is a big help that they've added this. Once a hand is raised, when you open that pane off to the side, you'll be able to see at the top of your attendees who has raised their hand. It can be hard to hear the alerts if you're talking or if someone else is talking. So you might want to pop in and check every once in a while to see if there's a hand been raised. And if you click that icon, the notification goes away. It'll tell you they've lowered their hand. As you heard, I addressed the person by name, got their response, and moved on. That smooth gatekeeping practice has helped a lot compared to where we were when we first flipped to remote. That's what you're clicking to get in there. There's your raised hand piece. Breakout rooms then. This little circle, square, and triangle icon here is called the activity area. And if you are a Meet manager, you're the one in charge of the room, then you have access to this and can go ahead and use these activities in your session. Students cannot start them, although if you have Q&A and you've allowed them to ask questions, they can. So this activity area is where you will direct students if you're going to use these pieces too. If you're using the breakout rooms, be very, very clear what students should do when they get into the room and how they'll come back if they need to. So our activities area breakout rooms, when we click there as organizers, what you'll then see is an ability to set up the breakout rooms. This menu then will let you choose how many rooms, a timer if you want that breakout room to be limited to a specific amount of time. You can shuffle all of your attendees into different rooms. You can clear all of this and start back over again if you'd like. And you can drag and drop attendees in between different rooms. So if you need someone moved into a different room, you can do that quite quickly here in this Setup Breakout Rooms area. When you click Open Rooms, everyone will bust into those rooms very quickly. And then you can quickly call them back as well. So I'm going to show you how this would work here. When you're in, you'll see a bar across the top that says breakout rooms are in session. This lets a new attendee know, why is there nobody here? They're all in a breakout room. Once that, another piece there is that you will see the breakout rooms edit information changes once those rooms are created. You then have an edit rooms feature and a close rooms feature. So when you're done, you can close all of those rooms and everybody gets booted back into the main call. If you need to edit them, change the amount of time that everyone has, add a time limit, for example, or in some other way, shift people around, you can do that quickly while those breakout rooms are in session. to join one, if you're the meeting organizer, click in, you will join into that room, and you'll be able to leave it and come back to the main one just as quickly. As the time limit runs out, you'll see that the time limit is on that bar across the top. When it gets under 1 minute, the bar will turn red, but there is no notification to let everyone know that the time is running out. The bar turning red is it. When it ends, they're all booted back to the main room. So I'm going to switch over, if I can, to my meet session, if I know where I am. And I am going to try to do a breakout room, a set of breakout rooms for everyone. I am going to set these at, let's try 6, shuffling everybody in. There will be a grand total of 2 minutes in these breakout rooms. Everybody's shuffled in, so you're going to go into a different room, and in 2 minutes, you're going to come back to this one. Feel free to talk, chat, look around, see what you can do. Try sharing your screens, and then in 2 minutes, everybody's going to get thrown back into here. All right? So if you get kicked out of the call altogether, please let me know. I'm actually going to shuffle you all again in here, or I'll leave her here. Here we go. It appears that some of you got booted back into the main call. Breakout 6 asked for help, so okay. Everyone should be back into our main room again, and I have lost the ability to use my microphone. So I have had to switch to my laptop's microphone. My apologies if we're getting extra stuff coming in from other areas. I'm trying to stop what I can. But we all should be back in our main space again. Let me get back to here. All right, so that's different. It works pretty well if you have activities for them to work on individually in groups, that is. So push them out there. You can go in and jump into the rooms and monitor as you need. But it does take a little bit of troubleshooting at first. And anybody who is unable to join a room may need to have a bit of extra oomph provided there. Okay, I am not sharing my screen yet, so I'll make sure I do that. Oops. Okay. Now Q&A.
requires the web version. So, Diane, I'm not certain about holding those breakout rooms, but I think they do stay, especially if you have a permanent Google Meet room. They should stay and allow you to continue using them each time you join again. But I'm not 100% certain on that. So I suggest some troubleshooting there. The Q&A feature allows anyone to ask a question if you enable the feature. You have to enable it, though, first by going into Q&A and allowing questions, as you can see on that second image there. If you slide that slider over to allow it, then anyone can ask a question. They click into that activities, click on Q&A, and then they ask the question. Note that on the right side here, the question this is the interface for a question being asked. At the bottom of that interface, it says your name and question will be recorded. There are no anonymous questions, even though they may appear that way on occasion. They're going to roll that anonymous questioning out, but you'll still be able to moderate them. After the meeting, you get a detailed report of all the Q&As, including what students may have responded, which students didn't, which did. A lot of the reporting that you get with activities will be very helpful to you if you're looking for proof of participation. This is automatically sent to you because of our license here, but do consider using this as a secondary backup for proof of participation. Polls, again, require the web version. The Q&A lets you hold, yeah, I suppose upvoting is kind of the main advantage to that. It does keep them separate so that you don't lose them as you're working within a course as well, Connie. I found that that's probably the best piece for me for using Q&A is because it keeps them all in that spot for me. The polls do require the web version. You can set these up in advance. If you have a permanent Meet room, they'll remain there. I've got one sitting in this particular room. But all you have to do to set one up is click on polls and activities, click start a poll, and then fill it out. Add as many options as you want to, and then save it or launch it. It will record the names and their answers. So this can be a quick check way for you to quickly determine if students are kind of comprehending what's going on in your class. An understanding check, an exit ticket, all of these pieces, you start the class with this. If you save these, you can use them the next time the class meets. Students will see them in advance if you don't save them. Or if you do save them, sorry. But the launching means that it's ready for you to go ahead and use it then. So I'm going to jump back out and try to push out a poll here to everyone to see if you're able to use that while I look over my chat here. Breakout rooms get recorded if the overall meet is recorded. No, the breakout rooms are not recorded. It's just logistically impossible to record 6 things at the same time or easily get them to you in a way that makes sense. So it's my understanding is that they do not get recorded, but where you go as the host does. So if you pop into room 6, that interaction will be recorded. And if you pop back into 3, that one. But that's the piece that's recorded and not all of them. The chat appears to be recorded for everything, but I haven't done it for complicated Meet setups, so I'm not 100% certain how much it captures from the breakout rooms as well. All right. So if I show everybody our results, no one said I shared the agenda or started the activity. I didn't blur my background. I didn't wear a brightly colored top. So yay, of the 3 of us who participated in the poll, who were able to, because remember, if you're not on a web browser, probably can't participate in the poll. So students joining via mobile, might not be able to participate. Right? So that's a poll, a quick little temperature taking of what's going on in your class. Let me come back in here. All right, avoiding the ghost town syndrome. A recent study, and this is published last year, said that students who were reviewing the kinds of discussions and interactions that faculty required in their course, these were the 4 areas that they felt were most lacking for many faculty. And when the faculty used them well, those courses were outstanding. Students retained more, they enjoyed them more, and that's really what engagement is, getting them to really grapple with your concepts. So how do you do that? Any activity that you have students do, especially during a synchronous time, needs to be clearly something that has a purpose. It has a reason behind it that is not just to pad the points in the course or just do something because it's a check in a box. Yeah, I filled out the worksheet. Instead, we're trying to get those interactions to be as close to real world interactions as possible. We want students to be able to do those kinds of things together that they would be doing in the regular world. So have them work together on a report. Have them work together to talk about something and come up to a decision in a small group. Something that's letting them practice those skills that they're going to need once they leave our hallowed halls. These things need to be relevant too, though. We can't just have them do something that's just what the textbook says we should be doing. Make these activities and interactions things they would expect to do in their careers as much as possible. If they're supposed to fill in an intake form, is the intake form really the best way to do that? Or is there a better revision for that form? Have them talk about that and maybe come up with a few things to contribute there, as opposed to fill in the blank or matching and things of that nature. They need to be substantive. Students recognize this. These were students, by the way, in high school and in undergraduate courses, and I think there were a few graduate level. These interactions need to focus on course concepts. So if you're asking students to have their first discussion board post be, tell me a little bit about yourself, they hate it. This is pointless. Even if you tell me it's for 5 points, it's pointless. This is getting me nothing. They don't see the reason why telling you about themselves is a point for them. How is it useful to them? Sure, it introduces them to you, but they don't need anything from that. Instead, have them come up with something. How did you interact with this topic previously? What so far has interested you about that topic? Focus on the topic of your course, not on asking them to talk about themselves personally. They're not going to want to. And they expect instructor guidance. Students need to have their instructors push them along. If we're asking for them to produce this information or work together to come up with this, if we just leave them to do it all on their own, they're frustrated, they're confused, and they don't understand why, or they're never going to get very in-depth with it. Ask a couple questions. You don't have to go into long explanations, but just as you notice that students in a group, for example, in a breakout or working on something, pop in, ask a couple questions, say something to think about, and pop into another session, another breakout room. Urge them on to think deeper, but don't assume that they will do so on their own. Pop in, push them a little. The most engaging activities are going to center on those course concepts, be based in those real world scenarios. They do not have a right or wrong answer. This is exploring and thinking more so than getting to the right answer. These are discussions and interactions, and this is how we form knowledge. Reading and trying to absorb it as a sponge doesn't always work. So puzzling through the right and wrong answers is a really, really good way to have students recognize the value just in interacting. Have very clear directions for what students should do for each interaction. If they're just sitting there passively watching the PowerPoint, that's one thing. If you're asking them to come up with a list of 3 questions over the content from the next 10 minutes, that's going to actually have them moving and engaging with the content as well. Try to break your sessions up into Meet to enable those students to be active at least every 20 minutes. Have them do something, click something, share something, talk, whatever it is, every 20 minutes at least. More often is better. Those poll or Q&A questions can serve as a quick check for your lecture, but getting them to actually work with each other is far better. Getting them to interact is really what you want, more so than you pushing things and asking or begging them to give you feedback. When it comes to clear guidance for students, make sure you share the protocol for asking questions during the session. If you're going to have them raise hands, tell them that's how you're going to respond. If you want them to use the chat, tell them that's how you want them to respond. When you came into this session, I expressly asked for muted microphones and cameras turned off. And I told you why. If you share that from the start, you have far fewer problems trying to catch up to everyone muting themselves. If you let students know you're going to call on absolutely everyone at some point, but you allow them to choose whether they answer via chat or speech, you're accommodating any obstacles they may have with technology, and you're also allowing them to choose the best way that they would prefer to reply and respond. One of the big things that faculty may not realize is that students usually don't know how to move an academic discussion forward. They have no idea. They've been through a lot of the sage on the stage style of teaching, and they're used to absorbing but not compiling the knowledge themselves or constructing it themselves. So if you come up with a list of great guiding templates or question stems, have a student grab one randomly if they're put on the spot and need to respond. And what do you think about that, Charles? If I had to explain it to a 5-year-old, I'd say they can now contribute. They have a safe place to go that will help train them on the best way to start moving these kinds of conversations forward. These guiding templates and question stems make a huge difference in online discussions, whether in person through Meet or in discussion boards too. A few ideas. Have your individual students jump off during a Meet and find a website, photo, some other media, and bring it back in and share it via the chat or share by presenting their screen. And this rest of the class can evaluate that site, photo, etc., using criteria from the course. They can compile that list in the chat, they can compile it in another Google Doc, whatever the case is, or just talk about it. Share a video and have students collaborate together on a single Google Doc to compile a list of aspects of the unit evident in the video. One of the neat things here is that you can turn off your microphone and let them start talking. Your leaders will start to show up and make themselves known. The people who have the best writing skills will start to be note takers. Some of them will start giving their own ideas so that they don't have to type. They'll speak up so they don't have to. So getting the students to do the work for you can do such cool things as create the study guide for the final or create the slides for the next chapter. Groups of 3 or 4 can each collaborate on a single slide illustrating one of the concepts, and they've prepared your slides. All of these kinds of collaborative activities that use Google Apps, we're going to have a session on collaborating in Canvas with Google, probably in late March, early April. So if these are things that interest you, give a look-see into that session. If you're really not familiar with Google Apps at all, you can open a discussion board in Blackboard and use that at the same time simultaneously. This will let you have a space to share links to videos and share documents and all those other things that can get cumbersome to share in Meet. Do it right there in the discussion board. We had a social hour activity for the adjunct professional development session, and I recorded that, but there are some really fun icebreaker games and just activities that use Meet we had a lot of fun with that. You can use it as prizes, you can add in some concepts from your course, but I wanted to link to that in case everybody kind of wanted to look in there as well. You'll, again, have a copy of these slides in this session. Once we finish up here, I know it's noon, so I'm flying through at the end here. Note that this is brand spanking new. We are on the cutting edge here. We have to learn together how to make this work well for education. Acknowledge to your students, this is a struggle for everyone. It's new. Openly discuss the differences that you have between talking in the classroom and this virtual communication. And above all else, be patient with yourself. You need it just as much as your students do. All right, thanks so much. If you have any questions, if it has to do with connecting or setting up a device, help desk option 1. If a feature in Meet isn't working or you want to see if Meet can do something, option 2 or Meet. I'll send this all out to you as soon as I get the recording back. If there's any questions, I'll track over here now. Otherwise, feel free to pop off to the next session. Thanks a lot, everybody.